Hey, we are here. It is SUM Disruptors Podcast. I am Mack McKelvey. I am forever joined by Bestie from the Southwest. What's up, HK?
What up, Mac? Good to see you, lady.
It's good to see you. I think before we begin today and before we introduce our amazing guest, let's just take a minute and send out some really great thoughts to the people that are affected in Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, like Southeast of the United States, pretty battered by Hurricane Helene. And I don't think we even are close to knowing the extent of it. So just sending a huge shout out to everybody that's been affected. So I think everybody shares in that too. All right. And with that, let's introduce one of my favorite people, my colleague and friend. I'm just going to say that. She may not agree with that, but well, colleague, she has to because the paycheck comes, but friend, maybe not. We'll see. Beth Pyne, welcome to the SUM Disruptors Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I know you've watched the first, actually watched all the episodes, so you know what's coming.
Episodes. So hopefully I know what's coming. The last time we did a podcast together, Mac, it was a dry run for another podcast to make sure you were ready. So this one's the legit one. So
that was all the practice you get. Now this is just, we're going to go live. We're going to see where this goes. We're going to do it. So now you know, right? So you know one of the things we're going to ask you, I'm going to ask you, what is your housewife's introduction? And then we're going to do your real introduction.
Okay. So I think you might know this. I'm not as obsessed with the housewives as some. I really do love the ladies from Salt Lake City, though. But because I got into that one holiday break. So I did my best here. So here we go. I'm not just building brands. I'm creating experiences. From boardrooms to ballrooms, I turn every event into an opportunity.
Well done. Well done.
I feel like after dark, Beth's Real Housewives would be very different. I feel like that was very much a daytime.
Yeah.
PG rated. I feel like there could be
before cocktail hour.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's PC, pre-cocktail. PC, which I am drinking some Malbec tonight. Beth, what do you have?
Well, I'm coming off a weekend where I was at a wedding, so I'm drinking some seltzer to rehydrate myself.
Very, very good. And Heidi, I know it's going to be a sad thing in your cup. What is it?
It's just water. And, thoughts and prayers out to all of our friends and family that are hurting in the South. That same storm has sucked all of the moisture out of the air in the Southwest. So it's been unseasonably hot here. It was 114 on Saturday.
Wow.
Which is not what happens in September. So
I felt we had left Dante's Inferno, but in fact, you were just on a brief hiatus from it, and now it's back.
When the villagers that are from here are restless about the weather, it's real. But it's supposed to turn the corner. It's hot.
It's hot. Okay, Heidi, you have to do your Housewives intro.
If you think my t-shirt makes a statement, wait till you hear me roar. And then Mac will say, and what does the shirt say today?
What does the shirt say?
And today is a little pilgrimage to the education that my son is receiving at ASU. It is a Forks Up t-shirt. This weekend is Parents Weekend. And I know what everybody's saying out there. Oh my God. You live in Arizona. It's right there. I haven't seen him in 6 weeks. His biceps are getting very, very strong. Oh. I will see him. Yeah, no. You know what I'm talking about. He's lifting things that are not books at ASU because that's what you do. But shout out to my homie, if he's watching, my son that aspires to be nothing but Harvey Specter in his life. Oh. Yeah. So This weekend is Parents Weekend. We're going to go watch ASU play Kansas. So that's why this is the show today.
I mean, what we were all thinking, Heidi, is not, oh, it's so close to your home. It's, wow, you have a kid in college?
Yeah. Oh, God love you. I see why we employ this beautiful human being. But people are like, what does their shirt say? It says Forks Up because it's a Sun Devil folk. Keep up. Don't
Got it.
Things. Yeah. Okay.
All right. I'll do mine.
Okay, Mac, your turn.
I'll do quick. All right. I may have two names, but don't get it twisted. I know exactly who I am. And I'll just give a big roll tide to University of Alabama, who played one of the best football games I've ever seen. And Georgia rocked it. Don't get me wrong. That was a fun game to watch. It was a nail biter to the end. Thank you for great college football this weekend. I think we all could use a little distraction from the sadness that's going on. So with that, let's kick it up back over to Beth Pyne to do a proper introduction of your world in marketing, Beth, because tonight we're going to talk about some of the more fun side of marketing, harder to measure maybe, harder to get your arms around maybe, but we're talking about all things customer marketing, events marketing, all the things.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's get an intro from you, Beth. Self-intro, shoot.
Oh gosh. Self-intro. I have 15 plus years in marketing. Before I became the VP of marketing at SalientMG, all of my experiences in-house. So worked for big companies like Yahoo, went to IPO stage startups like Demand Media that went public when I was there, and then moved into the SaaS world for a bit out of advertising for a couple of growth stage startups. Went back into ad tech for a bit before I was introduced to the lovely Mack McKelvey. Realized companies like Salient existed, and she has been stuck with me for the last 4.5 years. Really started my career as more of a marketing generalist, but as I got into my career, spent a lot of time in industry relations, trade marketing, and event and field marketing, focused on large sponsored event activations, plus owned and operated events within our companies to help support prospect and customer marketing.
And we know that startups are confused about how much they should spend, how much they should concentrate on, what the role of events are. And that's what we're going to dissect a little bit today, talking from your perspective on how companies can really utilize events in a more strategic way to meet the objectives they're trying to meet. That's what we're going to do. Are you game?
I'm totally game.
All right. So
I feel like events were just made to be boondoggles for salespeople.
Boom. Let's start with that. What is your argument?
Feel like, but we have to go because we've always gone. And it's like, yeah, because you want to file the expense report with all the tequila. We know.
Obviously, who doesn't want to do that? I mean, I think events have a place at every stage in the marketing funnel. And I think if you're going to execute events well, you need to have your pre-event planning and pre-event promotion down. In my opinion, sales, if you're not pre-booking meetings, if you don't have on-site activations, or you're not speaking on-site, or you can't prove to me that your time on-site will be well worth the return, sorry, you're not attending the event. I'll take those sales folks who work the event in front to book those meetings so we can measure the efficacy of the event and drive pipeline at the end of the day.
Is that measurable?
Events are measurable. And I think it's one of those things where I think every marketing activity, especially for startups, becomes very hard to think about measurement because they don't have measurement plans in place. They don't have the systems in place to measure. But really what you have to do is, if you have a good CRM system, you have to set up a campaign for every event. And that's where you load your lead list, load the activities that happen as part of that event, and make sure everything's tagged to that specific event so you can measure the ROI. And let's be honest, events are a touch point. Like, sales could be having conversations with these brands before the event, but we're giving them a touch point to potentially meet with that brand on site, where they might have had to travel for a meeting outside of there, or facilitating something for them, where at least if it's not a marketing direct pipeline attribution, it's an influence attribution because we're touching their customer, their prospective customer, along the way.
I want to go back to something you said before, because I think it's really important. I'd love it if you could bring it to life a little bit too, is that events have a role in each stage of the funnel. What does that look like from an awareness through advocacy? Talk to us a little bit about how events impact that.
Yeah. I think we always talk about this, at least Mac, in our world, we talk about this when we talk to some of our clients and talk to some of our prospects on the B2B marketing side with Salient. But really, like 95 to 97% of a company's TAM isn't ready to buy when sales is doing outreach. You know, they're already in place with contracts. They don't have budget approval yet, so they're not ready to buy. So you really need events for an awareness play. Really, so it gives them a place to learn about solutions. And if they're not ready to buy, then at least start that conversation so you brand awareness for when they are ready to buy, you're top of mind, they've learned about your solution, they know what's happening. And I also think with that, it's really this education and awareness play, because all of your competitors are going to be there. It is the way it happens. So you need to show up in the right way for your brand and the right way for these prospects, because if you don't, then your competitors are going to be the ones educating them and giving them brand awareness about their companies over yours. Then I think about, as you want to move people down the funnel, if you're in active deal cycles with people, it gives you a place to see your thought leadership on stage and think about, oh, this company has really insightful things to say at this conference. I really like what they're saying. This really resonates with me about the problems they're trying to solve. It can help move people down that funnel into the conversion. And then I think customer advocacy and customer events, it's a great place to raise your customers' profile, showcase what they're doing on stage to help convert or at least educate those prospects who are not aware of you or who might be deciding on you, and make your customers the hero by giving them a place to speak. It also allows you to meet with them and check in with them in person, whether that's in a trade show booth or at a cocktail party. It really just gives you an additional touch with them that you might not have, because everybody's so busy in their day-to-day to have more and more meetings.
What's the return on, you think about 1x, 2x, 3x? What should be an ROI on making an investment in an event? Is there sometimes there's not a dollar for dollar and it's just a cost of doing business? Like you need to do it. Like what's your got a rule of thumb there?
I definitely. So I think you need to be the CFO's best friend. So you need to show return on investment so your marketing budget keeps getting approved, especially for events, which is such a huge cost center because of all that goes into it. So the way I like to think about it is, for example, when I worked at a SaaS company for a long time, NRF was a big show that we did. Really, we couldn't see conversions on that for about 6 to 9 months. It was the longest lead source we had because of that percentage of TAM who's not ready to buy, who's really just educating themselves for the first time. So I think you have to look at it as a quarter over quarter thing, in my opinion. So it's like maybe 6 months after the event, you want to show at least 1x the return on that event. 12 months, 2x, and then calculate it from there so you can make sure you're making that revenue back. And it's really working with the sales team on this too, because I think there's also a lot of misconceptions, whether it's a marketing-driven lead or a sales-driven lead, who gets credit, because obviously everybody wants to keep their job at the end of the day. So it's really working with sales as well to showcase the importance of tagging these and tracking these correctly so we can continue to show up for them in market.
That's a good one, by the way. I'd love to go down this path, which is, what is the role between sales and marketing from event strategy through execution? Like how close should sales be aligned? Or let me ask another question. How should marketing get sales aligned?
Yeah. So I think, look, as somebody who's done events for a long time, like I was my CRO's probably best friend and worst enemy at the same time. You want sales to be involved from the start, because they're going to hear from their customers, or they're going to see where their prospects are going. So it's a great way for them to refer in potentially new events that might not be on your marketing roadmap, that you might not have on your radar yet from your due diligence. So I think from that perspective, it's hugely helpful. I also think from the beginning, you're going to get lists from the event if you're sponsoring. So it's making sure you're partnered with sales and have an activation plan on how you can activate against that sponsor list, as well as potentially lists that you have in your database from past years' events. So that way we can ensure that there's marketing communications happening, but there's sales communications that are happening in tandem that aren't overlapping and overwhelming. So you need to have a concise communication strategy with your sales counterparts. And then I think it also comes down to educating them on the cost, because I don't think salespeople understand the amount of investment that goes into certain trade shows or certain events. So they assume they can just attend on top of it, and that's added T&E cost, added cost across the board. So I think making sure they understand the costs associated, so you can gather feedback from them during the show and immediately following the show to make sure it's worthwhile the investment, because events also want you to re-sign when you're on site for the following year, which is very hard, because when I used to do NRF, I would have to re-sign on day one, basically 10 minutes after the trade show opened, because of my my point system with NRF. So it's like you really need to have that open dialogue because you have a small window post-event as well to potentially get out of a contract that is not worth the investment for the following year.
Let me ask you a controversial question. Are trade shows still worth it?
I think it depends on the industry you're in. So I think if you're in retail technology, trade shows are king. They have been king, but I wouldn't say there's one a month. I think there's a couple per year that really make sense. Like there's the NRFs, the shop talks, things. Commerce Next has a small exhibiting component to it. Those I think are really valuable. I think in cybersecurity, there's huge conferences like RSA and Black Hat. And I think those, you, in order to do business, because your competitors are showing up, you have to show up in some kind of intentional way, whether that's a booth or a smaller meeting space sponsorship for you to host meetings. You do have to show up to get that brand awareness to show you're still on that same playing field. Advertising, on the other hand, if you're in ad tech, I don't think trade shows are worth the investment. Like when I think about different shows that happen at the different associations, I just don't think the ROI is there. And I think the dollars could be better spent towards thought leadership sessions or other things.
Oh, that's a trade-off, right? That's the big trade-off conversation. How do you have that conversation? Like where does that conversation start? Does that start out of marketing? Does it start at the C-suite? Like where does that happen?
I think you have to prioritize what your goals are for events. So I worked with a client at SalientMG who was in the retail space, and their goals for events were really showcasing their thought leadership. So then it became a trade-off for if they wanted, we all know, unless you are a brand, you have to pay for thought leadership. So it became a trade-off for them to say, well, if we want to speak, then we might not be able to do this component. And sharing their thought leadership and their case studies, because they have referenceable clients, was more important than the other footprint, and they were fine with that. Because the case studies and thought leadership were driving the conversations, not their footprint and their booth.
So brand, I know that in my career for events, like, you know, I think it's kind of you have to do them. It's one of those things that's like the lesser of the evil. It's just doing it and recognizing how to monetize it. So for me, I was always looking for brand memorabilia. You guys know what I'm trying to say. Brand memorability, right? So something that's super unique and super different and not the same swag as everybody had, not come and scan your business card, QR code, and win like a laptop or something. So how much do you think the creative aspect is needed in this situation?
I think it's huge. I think there's so much. I mean, Mac will laugh when I say that. We talk about it. Like you don't spend money on trash and trinkets. Like at the end of the day, that is a wasted spend. That is not, like, from an environmental perspective, not sustainable. And also then you're left, if you change brands, then you're left with all of this stuff in your home office that you don't know what to do with. So I think if you're going to show up, it has to work for your brand. So for example, I worked for a personalization company. We used to do caricatures at our event because it was something that people could take home. It was personalized for them. It went with our brand. We also worked with, when I worked with this client with Salient, they were in the retail space, and they partnered with a company that did personalized Nikes. So they gave them a really personalized experience and it was only a raffle to so many people who could do it, but it gave them a really personalized experience with that brand. So now every time they look at their shoes, they're going to remember that brand. So
What's the coolest thing you've ever done? And then I want to hear from you, Mac. What's the coolest, most unusual thing you've ever done? It can go back as far as you want.
I have two. Go ahead, Beth, unless you want more time to think.
So this isn't it happened when I worked at Yahoo. It was not my brainchild, but I really liked this idea. Yahoo gave out flip-flops, and on the bottom was what they call the Y bang, which is the Y with the exclamation point. So every time somebody stepped in the sand, you would have the Yahoo logo in the sand, which I thought was really interesting and unique. Again, not my idea. On the other hand, one event we did personalized backpacks. We had like a graffiti artist come in and paint people's names onto backpacks, and paint people's, like, if you lived in New York, it was the Eiffel Tower, and paint different elements onto these backpacks that people could leverage for their laptops for going to work, which I thought was fun.
That's cool. Okay, you got a couple of good ones. Like the flip flop thing is really cool.
I know. I think
Although
so
I
too.
think about flip flop engines, like I think about how I could tie. Like my mind immediately goes to the creative campaign there.
I'll say I have two. I was at VeriSign. This was not mine, by the way, but I supported on this one. We did. We were trying to figure out a cool way. I'm really going to date myself with this one. So to the young folks listening, you can look this up in encyclopedia. What this means, you don't even know what encyclopedia is. It's fine. At VeriSign, we were trying to show what text to screen could look like. So this was a brand new application. So this had to be back
New
in
world.
2002, maybe 2004. And what we did was during CTIA, which is the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association, that was the big one of the big mega events in the mobile industry. We did Battle of the One Hit Wonders, and we hired in Vanilla Ice, Tone Loc, the Sugar Hill Gang, Tiffany, and Thomas Dolby. At Hollywood and Vine in LA. We hired a Joan Rivers impersonator to work the red carpet. And we had just bought Jamba, it was Jamster in the US, ringtones. And we had the Crazy Frog on the big stuff, the big mascot, Crazy Frog on the red carpet. And the paparazzi were using flip phones because there's no such thing as smartphones back in the day, but they all had their flip phones out and so everything was about mobile. But when you got inside, we had all of these artists played their own one-hit wonders, and then everyone voted on who did the best job. And then at the end, they all got on stage and played each other's songs together. And I have never been to a more fun concert in my life. And yes, we ended up hanging out with Tone. Oh, I forgot Tone Loc. Tone Loc and Vanilla Ice afterwards at the
Do you
Rainbow.
make people vote on their smartphone, on their flip phone? Because
We
I feel
sure
like
did.
remember those prices if you
It
accidentally
was
tried
text to
sign on
screen.
the web.
It was text to screen. It was definitely in the Endemol early days of American Idol, but that really brought it to life though, because people were shocked that they could real time see all their votes up on screen. And I know that sounds insane to you. That was innovative at all, but it was huge. It was huge at the time. That was one. The other one I'll be quick on, which was at AMS, which was acquired by CGI. We were selling billing solutions, sexy stuff. And the conference was based in DC. So we used the Spy Museum as our anchor place for the event. And we got spy pens, which wrote in invisible ink. And then you have to have the flashlight to read it. So we wrote notes to all of our customers and we made all the invitations like in like secret font, and everything was about this very DC, very spy. And then we had a big dinner at the Spy Museum and a whole event there. But everything was around cracking the code on your billing success. So we took a fun angle, and it was like Beth said, it was the way that we stood out on the floor because everyone was exhibiting. But we stood out because people were having fun with our kind of total experience that we were trying to create. And I think both of those are good examples of activation.
I'm going to
really
share two because I feel left out at not.
I want it.
We
What you got,
talked about
HK?
CTIA, and I wasn't the master architect of this, but who knows if you were there. And it was in LA. It was when I worked for InfoSpace, and we had acquired Moviso and had the games division, and we were launching a Tony Hawk skateboard game. And we had Tony Hawk and all of his homeboys actually doing had the full half pipes on the CTIA floor. And that was pretty freaking cool.
That's
man.
cool.
You're just like, it felt a little Lords of Dogtown, but inside. For anybody, again, to date myself, go watch that movie. My favorite one that I ever architected, though, was working for a company called Jumac, which I was the kind of interim CMO for a really long period of time for this company. All of the executive team were in the United States, but it was a company out of Guatemala. And the gent that stood this company was an Adobe Experience Manager agency. They ended up being acquired by WPP eventually, but he stood up this company is native of Guatemala to educate and train the people of Guatemala and Colombia. And so all of our dev and design teams were nearshore Colombia and Guatemala. He happened to be personal friends with Ron Zacapa. So Zacapa, really, really expensive, amazing Guatemalan rum that's aged in barrels. We had we gave away a bunch of things in the booth that were Zacapa related tastings. And then we had a private hosted dinner, Ron Zacapa dinner with him to kind of walk through the tasting of all of it. And it was, we brought in where it brought the technology, it was really bringing Guatemala and the culture of the company was what we were trying to showcase versus we're an integrator. We're an integrator and a solutions provider. Again, not super sexy, but what was sexy about it was what he was doing, the founder of this company, and the culture he was building with all of the individuals. And we kind of brought that to life with, all the colors and all the things. That was so fun. And to get to be in a booth and be able to drink high-end Zacapa rum all day. And Mac, you probably, I don't know if you remember this, but I only drink cold beverages. I don't even do red wine. Everything has to be cold. First time I was ever in Guatemala and served my first glass of this wine, I am going to grab ice out of the ice bucket, and he throws like a penalty card down in front of me. He was like, no.
Was it a yellow or a red card? I'm assuming
it was a red card. No. Anyways, but I think that's a lot of, I think people go through the motions of having they spend all the time on, the deck that's the service offering and the collateral and all the things, and lose track of its human beings in there. And you want them to walk away and be like, boom, remember those really cool people I met? Because in the end, you're going to find technologies and solutions that are going to work for you. Many of them on a big show floor, like an NRF or a CES or a CTIA. It's really all about fit and creativity, at least from a marketing perspective. And I think that gets a little lost in the shuffle sometimes.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think we're talking about, I think we all use, not completely, but we use a lot of examples from big company, right? But I think, Beth, I think you used one from a startup that you don't have to break the bank, but HK, what you were just saying, it's what experience you're creating. And I think that's what Beth does extremely well is it isn't about what's the event production going to be. She looks at it as what experience do you want that person to have? I'll build an event strategy around that, but I want to know, do you want high touch? Is it education? Is it relationship building? She starts with sort of macro experience objectives as well. And I think that's so critical because you're right. It depends on where it is in the funnel and it depends on what you're trying to do at the event. So I think the message
you're trying
for startup, we're talking to startup marketers, right? So their budgets are light. We know this. Mm-hmm. So how would you talk to a startup marketer about using events really to create an experience without breaking the bank?
I mean, the other thing is when I used to do NRF, we were at a growth stage startups, but there was money aside for that. When I started at Demand Media, for example, it didn't have a good, they owned a lot of owned and operated properties. They were starting their branded ad sales team. There wasn't this huge budget to go after events. So you also have to think of guerrilla activations. So during advertising week, I couldn't afford a sponsorship at advertising week. We hired a food truck to go to different agencies during advertising week to feed people at agencies who were on their way to advertising week versus doing the large sponsorship with advertising week. Or you think about, we did a couple high touch where we had a small little summit down in Austin during Austin City Limits. So, and then we took clients to Austin City Limits for that. So it's you have to think about the audience you want to go after if you're looking to attack the masses or an elite few, and then really map your objectives. And any budget can be used for an event. It can be as small as a cool direct mail activation to a select few, to a larger customer event, to a small dinner party where your CEO just goes on the road to hear customer feedback or meet with prospects and share some thought leadership.
How do you budget for events?
So I think this is interesting. And the way I budget for events is based on data that I already know. Everywhere I've worked has had some kind of data that I can look at. And I think, even at startups, there is some kind of data you can look at. So I think you have to look at, the lists for events, and then backtrack, how many, if you were going to have a booth, how many leads do you think you could get in your booth? And then take that down the funnel to see, okay, well, let's just say they did one show and they got 50 leads. Well, I know only 40% of them converted to meetings. But we're going to say 50% because we know I can't do math. So 50% of them converted to meetings. So you got 25 meetings. Well, only 20% of those made it to proposal stage. And only 10% of those made it to closed customers. So I think you have to create your own funnel. Even if there's not best available data, create it on your own based on historical knowledge you might have from other companies. And it's the first time you can do it, and you can then tweak it from there until you have data available. Because I think you need to show the ROI from the get-go so you can make a business case to your CFO, your CEO, whoever is in charge of that budget, that events are critical. And I think you also have to show that competitors are showing up, prospects are showing up. You need to have a place here. So even with that, there's an awareness play that you can't always tie back to ROI, but that is critical for your brand in order to succeed.
I love everything that you've said right there. And one thing I think is missed by a lot of individuals when they're pitching somebody on investment, like they're a new startup and they've got two wet sticks and they got to figure out how to do, is also selling on before and after an event. Because I think that's a lot of the time where people, it's out of sight, out of mind. You've had this great experience. Everybody's high-fiving and sharing on Slack how amazing it was. But really, what is that from a marketing perspective? Like, forget about the sales funnel. Forget about sales picking up that they've got their meeting scheduled and they're having the conversation. Is what sales going to do with those opportunities in terms of creating like a nurture path or something to follow up with them and to keep them apprised of what's going on? Because I think a lot of times that's what gets lost in the shuffle is you're paying for a trade show, but you're really buying an opportunity to market to prospects and customers at a later time through the acquisition. Either they're going to go and pay for ad traffic or they're going to buy a list and they're going to go that way. This is creating like an introduction. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about how much focus should be done before leading up. And then what are the types of things and how much focus and care and feeding should be done after the event's all done and people are done high-fiving and all the things.
And before you answer that, Beth, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsor, who is Startup Marketer. And then I know everybody wants to hear this response. So we will be back in about 25, 30 seconds. And Beth is going to answer that question that Heidi asked. We'll be right back.
We love startups, but marketing for them can be hard. Whether you're a founder, a seasoned marketer, or a recent marketing grad, Startup Marketer is here to help. Startup Marketer, or SUM for short, is a first-of-its-kind marketing ecosystem designed by startup marketers with experience working with over 100 startups. We understand the unique challenges you face because we've been there, and we're sharing our cheat codes for success. With bespoke marketing templates, on-demand courses, interactive sessions with experts, and a vibrant community of like-minded professionals, SUM combines accelerator muscle with community wisdom. You can even book an expert to troubleshoot or ideate in real time with senior strategists and senior doers. In a world where marketing is a critical element for startup success, SUM equips you with everything you need to drive growth and stay ahead. So join SUM today and elevate your marketing game. Visit thestartupmarketer.com.
All right, we are back. I'm Mack McKelvey. We've got
HK.
And the Beth Pyne. And Beth is about to answer the $1 million question.
So everybody thinks of the event as like the day, and that is all that happens. But that is not the case. You need to start preparing from a marketing lens. You need, depending on the event, 6-month lead up, 9-month lead up, depending on what you're doing. And that involves all of the things that you have to do from what's going to take place at the event, but all of your campaigns that you're going to do to market yourself at this event, whether that's social, email, sales nurture campaigns that you might put into a tool that they leverage, like a sales loft. So I think all of this goes into it. So, I mean, that's why sales really has to be involved from the get-go, or at least sales leadership, to get buy-in that this is the plan, this is the strategy, and this is where we need to lean on the sales team for support. And what that's going to be is combing through maybe the sponsor list that we get to look at what companies they own that are attending, so they could do personalized outreach and load that into their sales loft. While we're doing marketing comms around it from a larger awareness play, they can get down to love to meet you on site, book a meeting, pull in more personalized information. Hey, Mac, we met with you a couple weeks ago. See, you're going to be at X show. Would love to sit down, tell you about the changes to our platform or whatever that might be. So I think there is this huge campaign lead up from, 3 to 6 months before, depending on the event. If you're trying to fill the event yourself or you're attending or exhibiting at an event. Then the event happens. And I think as part of this, you are having routine sales meetings. You're attending those sales meetings. You are giving updates on what's happening with the event. If there are additions to the list, what else you were doing at the event, what press we might be issuing at that event, because there should always be a press component to keep yourself relevant and something newsworthy that you can also tell. So it's packaging up how we're going to leverage all of the channels in or around that event and making sure sales is aware of all of that and has what they need to do their own outreach. Then, of course, there's the event day where everybody's scanning and having a great time. And then that last night, everybody's going to go out, drink that tequila, have a great time, probably throw down that corporate card, which is not going to make the CEO pretty happy.
And wasn't in the budget.
It wasn't in marketing's budget, so that's going to come from somewhere else. But as a marketer, you are then loading that list into the CRM. You are tagging that. And you are having a post-mortem with your sales team 48 hours after this event. I usually trigger a survey as soon as the event closes to gather feedback, capture important meetings, capture notes on the import list to see what our next steps we promised out of that, and then have a meeting to review that post-mortem to make sure that our thank you note has gone out from a marketing perspective, but also sales understands what they have to do in terms of a follow-up or handoff if the correct salesperson wasn't available on site. And then I think there's also marketing content that comes after that, the learnings, the themes, how that ties into, like, for example, NRF kicks off the year. So how do the themes from NRF then become talking points that you leverage for your own marketing content and communications moving forward?
I want to pause you there because I'm curious about your perspective on this. And HK, same thing. Is our company startups, do they move on from an event too quickly and focus on the next one?
Yes, they move on too quickly, which I think it's natural because of the seasonality with events, especially in certain industries, they are right on top of each other. So I'll use retail as an example because I just did a bunch of retail shows. So NRF is the middle of January. eTail West is the third week in February. Shop Talk is the third week of March. So you have 3 of the largest shows that retailers attend in the first 3 months of the year. So it is hard to extend NRF because everybody, including your prospects and companies, are jumping to eTail West. But I think you have to figure out how to leverage the learnings, the insights that is in that thought leadership in what's happening at NRF and fuel that into eTail West, because I'm sure a lot of it is going to be very same because there's not enough time to redo research that they're going to present, or retailers are going to be talking about a lot of the same things. So there's not a lot of time to redo presentations. So I think, yes, they move on quickly, but I think that's the nature of events. We have to figure out, I think everybody has to figure out how to extend the life of an event when there are other events on their heels every year. And it's difficult.
Brand memorabilia, brand memorability.
Exactly. I think that's what comes with experiences over trash and trinkets.
I have been, sorry, go ahead, Mac.
No, go ahead, please.
I've been on the edge of my seat and it feels like it's a speed run question. So trade show booth schedules.
Love them.
Okay. How much does marketing, knowing the heavy lift that marketing does, how much does marketing really need to be in that booth versus salespeople showing up, being there, not hungover, focused, educated on message?
So I think it depends.
And how do they approach writing one? I'm sorry. That's probably for our audience, probably more important. How do you put one together? What's fair, what's not?
Insist on a booth schedule. I swear by a booth schedule because look, nobody wants to stand in a booth for 10 hours a day. Your feet are going to hurt. You don't have time to eat. You have to use the bathroom. You need to drink water. You need to do all of the things. So I think and I also don't need 10 employees in a tiny booth all day. It's going to deter people from popping in, asking for demos, doing other things. So I think booth schedules are imperative because it gives a rotating group. It gives people time to rest. But I think you need to make sure when you schedule, you have a salesperson. If you have solution engineers as part of your group, they need to be in there who can help facilitate it as well as a customer success manager in case customers come in. So I think you have to look at everybody is attending, their titles, and then work that into a schedule. And I think the schedules can be anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day that rotate in. In terms of marketing support, I think if you have a dedicated events person as part of your marketing team. Like for me, I used to stay in the booth pretty much all day in case there was a tech issue, because God knows the Wi-Fi never works anywhere you want to go. In case, people had questions, or vendors would pop into the booth, or journalists, so I could direct them to the right people accordingly. I'm also a little bit, if you ask anybody I've worked with, I am a little bit of a
perfectionist,
crazy person when it comes to booths.
Perfectionist.
I don't want you eating in the booth. I don't want you drinking in the booth. I don't want your jacket in the booth. I don't want your luggage in the booth. There are places for that everywhere in the trade show. I am not there to store your stuff. I don't have cabinetry for everybody. So I was also the one enforcing the rules and making sure that it was clean, it was approachable for people, and conversations got started.
How do you, follow-up question, because I know this is on the minds of lots of folks that are planning their first event, is how do you pick and choose who attends? Because it feels like depending on where you are, you're going to go to Vegas, you've got a younger sales org, they all want to go to Vegas, right? So how do you make sure you mentioned a set of, somebody from customer support, success, or what have you. How do you determine who travels to these events? And I know that sales likes to lean in a lot and they want their opinion, but I always picked people that were going to work hard and show up that I could trust.
Yeah.
Because to your point, 10 hours in a booth, it's always us marketing people left in there. So.
And it's so funny that young salespeople want to go to Vegas. If I never go back to Vegas, I am fine with that. But you were spot on with that. I think this is where you have to partner with the head of sales and the head of customer success. Really look at those lists to understand. It's do a mapping and see who owns what accounts, and really see if I have 6 passes, one is going to go to marketing, and then see what the breakdown is for the rest of them. And I also think it's, if you have the hustle and you're going to book the most meetings, let's just say it's a salesperson who might only have 4 accounts versus 8, but they booked meetings for all 4 accounts, they're going over the person with 8 because they really showed the hustle and the initiative that they deserve to be there. I think it is interesting that marketing is often left in the booth. When I worked at one company, I had one guy that I wanted him with me at every trade show because he could work a booth and work a floor like nobody I had ever seen before.
Oh, that's a gift.
It was excellent. And he was fine staying in the booth extra and covering shifts. So there's also those people that I would always tap because I knew I could rely on them. So I advocated for them to come because I knew they would do a great job on site.
Let me ask you a question on that, follow-up question. Oh, this is a controversial one too.
Uh-oh.
Are salespeople the best people to be in the booth?
So I think it depends on what your objective is.
Heidi's like, oh man, I got an opinion. I see it. It's brewing.
So I personally think solution engineers are the greatest asset you can have in a booth because Amen. They can sell, they can do the demo, they can talk the technical, where a salesperson can't always do that. So where they have more of the robust all in, I think salespeople, I would prefer solution engineers to staff the booth before I would a salesperson. Same with customer CSMs, customer success managers, because they can tell those client stories and relate them to potential prospects, which I also think is interesting. But look, sales needs to close business. Sales needs a meeting place to meet with prospects, and this facilitates it so you don't have to travel all over the country. So sales, you deserve to be there, but put in the pre-work to show that you deserve to be there.
Well, and you said it. I mean, if 95% of your TAM is not ready to buy, it's not necessarily the moment that you're not selling
you're
at
not
that
pitching
point.
them.
You're marketing,
educating them, and marketing to them what your solution can solve for them.
Do you do pre-meetings with all attendees to get them?
Always. There's meetings in the lead up to keep everybody up to snuff on what's happening. And then there's a meeting a couple of days before, a full briefing meeting a couple of days before. So everybody knows by time what's happening every day. You have to, because everything is in the marketing team's head for the most part. And if you want it to be effective, you need to make sure everybody's on the same page. So the more transparent you are throughout the entire process and the more you can brief them, the more successful the event will be.
I'm always a big fan too of preparing a rude Q&A and coaching on etiquette.
Yeah.
Because again, I think we talked about this maybe last week, Mac, when I'm like, how many times they did this really well at Microsoft early in my career. I remember them sitting down as part of their kind of pre-guide was you never know who's sitting around listening
Yep.
to a conversation that you think you're just having a sandwich. You think you're just having a cocktail. Next thing you know, you're going to show up in a pub and they're going to talk up right. And I don't think that folks necessarily, if it's their first event, they think about it that way. They're so focused on making sure that everything is so perfect. Like you're the architect of the brand. And everything about the brand is so out in front when you're there, right? Anything from the logo on a shirt to how you tuck it in to all the things you don't even think about. Yeah.
I have a question, shifting gears a little bit. I know we're going to be winding down shortly. Not every startup does trade shows. Not every startup does mega events. So, Beth, in your professional opinion, if you were starting in let's call it an early to growth stage company, Series A, right? They've got 10 to 15 million in revenue.
Okay.
Tech sector, let's be a little vague, ed tech, something, I don't know. I'm just picking one verb, fintech, I don't really care. The head of marketing, relatively junior, meaning they're not super seasoned, but smart, obviously. Would you advise them to go down the route of get your customer advisory board in place, really get to know the customer, really get to think about more strategic events before the big mass marketing? Or would you start with mass marketing and save the more high touch stuff for later?
Good question.
So I would actually start with a customer advisory event. And the reason for this is I feel like it's startups. People are so focused on acquisition and they are not as focused on retention. And it costs, we all know as marketers, it costs so much more to acquire a new customer than it does to retain an existing customer. So if you could set up a customer advisory board, you can let them inform your product roadmap to create upsell opportunities, fix things that might be issues that might not have come to life until you get them in a room, and nip those in the bud before they are actually up for renewal, so they'll continue to work with you. And also make them feel like the heroes, because I think once they feel like heroes, once they feel supported and feel like a true partner, then that's where they'll want to advocate for you in marketing. And that's where marketing gets a bit easier, because then you can potentially get that case study, or you can potentially pitch them for press, or you can potentially pitch them for an earned speaking opportunity at one of these mass events before you go in for that huge dollar sponsorship. So I would always recommend customer advisory first, because you can do it well, make it high touch, make sure you can retain that customer base, upsell that customer base before you really seek out a huge trade show to try to mass acquire new customers.
I love that. Heidi, did you have a question? You look like I took you off your path.
No. I mean, I just think that was a really good question, Mac, because I think it's pretty daunting when you look at it, because
It's daunting. I mean, you have a finite budget, you have finite staff, you have finite time, you have finite capabilities. I actually also want to go back to something, Beth, you said earlier that I thought was really insightful is, so we move on from events, right? So you move on. So let's use your example of the retail shows, right? So you've done the first 3. Now you're on to the fall conferences. At what point do you stop though? Because you said it, right? So those are longer lead conversions. At what point in the year do you stop again and remeasure those earlier events?
So this is where, if you have a campaign in like a Salesforce set up, you can look at that dashboard live, because you can see how they're tracking within the pipeline, what the aging status is on the opportunities that are created, and really track them and see what is moving to closed won and closed lost. And also have those conversations with sales on where things are stuck, how marketing can help nudge them or move them along, since the first or second touch may have been the event, how we can help nurture them for sales so it doesn't always feel like sales reaching out. So that's where, if you set up your CRM correctly, load these lists and campaign correctly, you have a live dashboard. I used to live in my Salesforce dashboard when I was the director of North America for marketing, because I needed to see how my marketing dollars are working, what was aging, what was getting stuck, why it was getting stuck. And I had a whole sheet that told me, okay, well, this is what might need to happen at the objective handlings for these stages, and how can I help sales overcome that objective handling?
So
one more
slight
piece
commercial.
of content. Just one
go
more
ahead.
thing. No, I was going to
Yes,
say all you need to help them overcome. One more piece of content. Just one more
all
thing.
I need is
All
all
I
I
need
need is all I need is fill in the blank. It's the Mad Libs. We're gonna do write that Mad Libs at some point. By the way, the marketing Mad Libs, that'll be hysterical. We're gonna do that. So trademarked. No,
Yeah.
it's not at all trademarked, but we'll pretend. Beth, tell us what's coming up next for you.
Oh gosh, what is coming up next for me? Well, we have Advertising Week in New York City next week, which is very exciting because I think it's a great time to see old friends, see what's happening in the industry, get together. It's, I think shows in the back half of the year are always fun because, like I said, event season's so H1 heavy. Being able to check on with people in the back half of the year it's a nice excuse to get out there. So I think that's really exciting. I also might have grand jury duty. That is also potentially upcoming.
So my birthday is Wednesday. I'm going to say for my birthday present, I would like Beth to not get grand jury duty.
I'm going to bring Can Kay cut this and I'll bring it to the Queen's DA.
I have kind of, you made me think of a question, and I'm sorry, Mac, we're supposed to be done with the Q&A, but
go ahead.
Thing I want to know is post-COVID, do you feel like events are back to where they were prior to? Are they attending? People are comfortable? We think, yes?
I think they're back. I think there was, I think there's still virtual fatigue. I really do think there's virtual fatigue. Still, I don't know if webinars will ever recoup from COVID just because there were so many and it was the only way people could connect. I don't know if they'll recover, but in-person events, I feel like have rebounded. People want to get out. And I think in hybrid work settings or remote work settings, people really want to get out and network and see people. So it feels like they're back. I think it took until probably the back half of last year, though, for them to fully come back.
I'm just curious. That has been on the edge of my tongue.
That's a great one. That's a great one. I actually had one more kind of last question, if you will. And it's a little commercially, but it's actually hopefully helpful for the listeners. So Beth, I know that you spent a lot of time creating templates for folks.
I absolutely do. So in Startup Marketer, I create a lot of the templates that exist. So one, if you're listening and you're a member of Startup Marketer and you're looking for a template that might not be available, you can always message me in the community to request a template, and I'm happy to get those together for you. But I also want to call out all of my event templates that I have, like an after event report, an event budget template, a work back template, an event brief, an event promotion template. Those are all available in the community for download, and hopefully they can help ease some of the work where you can see what I've already set up and ease some of the work of figuring out what you need to create and how you create it moving forward.
That's amazing. Beth Pyne,
thanks for having me.
You're the best. Oh my God, this was so fun. We're going to have you back. We're going to talk about customer marketing and field marketing and all the things. But I think this is a timeless question that I really do believe all of us have to keep revisiting. Spend, right? As marketers, the responsible thing is, how do you do things more efficiently? How do you do things with better outcomes? How do you always challenge what Heidi said earlier? Like, oh, we've always done this. Because I'm a firm believer in what worked 2 years ago isn't necessarily what's getting you to your next stage. So revisiting things all the time, I think, is part of maturing as a marketing organization. Absolutely. And Beth, I think that what you outlined of everything from really focusing on creating the experience, the details, being relentless about ROI, because it helps everyone. It's your best friends to the CFO for sure, but it really does help marketing and sales and product. You can get a lot of learnings in real time that could feed all kinds of initiatives.
And if you prove ROI, your CFO might give you additional budget.
Just saying. You heard it from Beth. Mm-hmm. Beth, how do people get in touch with you?
People can get in touch with me by emailing me. I can be emailed at beth@SalientMG.com, or if you're part of the Startup Marketer community, you can find me in there. You can feel free to DM me or ask me any questions you have in any of the spaces that are subject matters.
Beth, you're the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having
me. Appreciate it.
HK, keep the AC on.
Don't have to tell me twice, girl.
And remember, I'm manifesting my birthday present of Beth not having grand jury duty. Namaste. Bye, everyone. Talk to you next week on the SUM Disruptors Podcast. I'm Mack McKelvey.
Yeah. HK. We'll see you
Beth
next
Pyne.
time.
Beth Pyne.
Beth Pyne.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.